Looking to start a church, business, or nonprofit organization in 2021? Do you need help forming an LLC, applying for a copyright or trademark, revising church bylaws, crafting a succession plan, or developing a compensation package for your pastor and staff? Contact the law office of Travell Travis, a Richmond-based legal boutique focused on the needs of pastors, entrepreneurs, creatives, and our community. Let's make your vision a reality in 2021. Visit TravellTravis.com. That's TRAVELL Travis.com. If you're concerned about the future of your organization when you step down, then where will the mantle fall? A biblical and legal guide to succession planning is a must-read for you. It delves into the scriptural and legal aspect of succession planning, characteristics of successors, the people, the process, church bylaws, common myths, even issues with nepotism. Where will the mantle fall? Written by Richmond's own attorney, Pastor Travell Travis, and available at Amazon.com.
Welcome to Mantle Mondays, and we're so honored to have you with us tonight. We're going to ask you to like, to share, to comment, inbox someone who's an aspiring leader, a current leader, if they're an entrepreneur, a pastor, an itinerant minister, evangelist, they're the head of a denomination or jurisdiction, if they're an author or aspiring author, or someone who's looking for good content, someone who's looking for information and insight and perspective. Let them know tonight Mantle Mondays is on the air. Mantle Mondays is designed to learn more about entrepreneurs, pastors, authors, and leaders, learn their stories, their struggles, their triumphs, how they came into who they are, some of their future aspirations, and how they balance work-life balance, if you will. And so we're so honored for this series, and we want to hear from you if this series has been a blessing to you. Our intent was only to do 1 month, but we feel led to do a second month. We started out with Dr. Dana Tyler. We had Pastor Bishop Michael Penn as a guest, Pastor Jay Patrick, and tonight I'm so honored to have none other than Bishop Mark A. Moore Sr. Bishop Moore is the founding pastor of the Faith Covenant Church in Atlanta, Georgia. He is the visionary and host of You Can Get There From Here, Visionary Leader Conference. He is the author of Provisions for the Journey, a 31-day biblical prayer guide for you if you're on consecration, a great book. Just to put a plug in, January is coming up. A lot of churches go on consecration. If you're really looking for a great book to read during your church consecration, I highly recommend Provision for the Journey by Bishop Mark Moore. But just as a quick testimony, I met Bishop Moore, I guess about 2 years ago at his son's conference, Young Leaders Conference. I introduced myself to him, gave him a copy of my book. That was in August. Then November, I attended his conference, the You Can Get There From Here conference. And I planned to be a vendor, didn't have enough books to be a vendor. And I told him, I apologize, I'm not gonna be able to be a vendor. He said, what books do you have? And I said, well, I have a few. He said, well, I want you to sit at my table. And believe it or not, here's the host of this conference, just preached a powerful message, leaves the ballroom, goes sits at his table and says, I want Travis to sit beside me at my table and sell his books. And this is the kind of man that he is. And since then, I consider him a friend, a father, a mentor, and I just thank God for him and his entire family. So Mantle Mondays, let's welcome none other than Bishop Mark A. Moore Sr., Atlanta, Georgia. Bishop Moore, how are you, sir?
Thank you, Bishop. I'm looking around just to see who that is you could be talking about. Uh, it's, I'm so honored and elated that you feel as you do, and I'm thankful, and I am enriched by the association. It looks, as I look at the screen of us together, it looks almost like we're in the same library.
Yes, sir. I changed up. I said, Bishop Moore got all those books. I'm changing locations.
I'm
Well,
honored to be here, Bishop. I'm
Merry
honored to be here.
Christmas
You're
to
good
you and to
people.
your family.
Sir,
Merry Christmas to you and to your family.
and likewise to you and yours. And I pray that this new year will make up for everything that was lost in this previous year.
Wow. And that's a great segue, really, to my first question, really, for you. And the others I kind of eased in. I'm coming at you full steam ahead with my first question.
All right.
In the words of Marvin Gaye, what's going on? We have COVID-19. We have Trumpism. You have Jacob Blake. You have Breonna Taylor, Amir Arbery, Rashard Brooks, George Floyd. You have a president that doesn't want to concede. You got white evangelicals thinking he's the Messiah. The rest of us think he's the devil of the Antichrist. COVID-19, churches are shut down. Bishop, as a man of God, what is God doing? What is God saying?
Well, the Bible talks about a time that's coming when everything that can be shaken will be shaken. My pastor, Bishop James Nelson in Baltimore, says this is the beginning of the end. It's not the end, but it's the signs of the beginning of the end. And I think that's why we are witnessing things that are completely unprecedented in our lifetime. I'm a couple days older than you, but I can say that I've never seen a time like this in my lifetime. I lived through the 60s. I was old enough toward the end of the 60s to at least to be aware of the riots, be aware of the unrest. I was old enough to be aware of the assassinations of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King. Lived through the 70s, entered into my teens in the 70s, and then the 80s, finished college, and so on. But I've never seen a time like this. So my shortest answer would be, I think that God is trying to get our attention.
Okay.
I do believe that we would be foolish to say that there's not an element of judgment on a sinful world, and that's politically incorrect in this day and time to imply that a loving God would rain judgment upon His creation.
Right.
But the reality is that if the Bible is right, and we know that it is, judgment has to be a part of God's plan.
Absolutely.
And so we've gotten so far away from God that, and it's not just, and as we can see from the evangelical community, it's not just society, but it is the church, so-called. I think that what we're seeing with all this evangelical support of Trump is that they are being exposed, their true heart, their true motivations. Many of them are being exposed as the spiritual descendants of the same people that used the Bible to justify slavery.
Wow.
And they've done a lot of talk over the past decade or two. I guess about 15, 20 years ago, you were hearing a lot of talk from the white evangelical community about racial reconciliation.
Right.
About that time was when you had a lot of the white evangelical, particularly even charismatic mega leaders, had a huge black population. And I think that God is exposing their true heart. He's exposing their lack of prophetic insight. He's exposing their lack of biblical discernment, and he's exposing their heart of racism. Because, and I hope I won't get in trouble. I don't mean to go too political, but how can you support someone whose largely their base is virulent racists.
Right.
Uh, Donald Trump's base support the Proud Boys, the
Absolutely.
KKK, the neo-Nazis. I don't know if there's a white nationalist racist group that has not come out in support of Donald Trump.
Wow. That says a lot.
So and so then how can I, if I'm a Christian, let's say that I'm a white Christian, how can I support him? At the very least, if I'm not a racist, I'm saying, as someone said, that racism is not a deal breaker. And if
And,
racism is not a deal breaker, then I think that makes you
right. Absolutely.
arguably pretty racist.
And that's the
So,
crazy thing. You know, if we read the same Bible,
mhm.
have the same Holy Ghost, and the church should be the one place where we should see unity, multiculturalism, the diversity in the kingdom. I've never seen seemingly the church so polarized, and particularly over one person. It's
Right.
amazing how two people can look at the same person. And I thought about it and said, well, George Bush, he was a Christian man, good man, but people different on politics. Clinton, you know, he had his moralists. I never seen where one camp has exalted a man so high to think he's like God's anointed, God's man, and other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
So can
It's
we
just
heal from
unbelievable.
this? Can we heal from this? Or is the church irreparably harmed? Is this
Well,
breach beyond repairing?
well, I pray, and you know, if I'm wrong, you can take it to the Lord for me and correct me. I honestly pray that, you know, the Bible says that Jesus said, "I come not to bring peace, but to
Mhm.
bring a sword, to set people at variance." I think that what he's saying is truth separates, and
Okay.
a lot of times we have wanted unity over truth. You know, the old protesters used to say, "No justice, no peace."
Absolutely. Right.
And I remember when South Africa ended apartheid and Nelson Mandela became the president. One of the first things that they did was had a Truth and Justice Commission,
Hmm.
and that commission, if I understand correctly, was not as much about punishing people as
Right.
it was about uncovering the truth, because as long as there are these other motives and other agendas and other value systems that are being swept under a rug, then any effort at reconciliation is bogus. So my hope is that long term there will be reconciliation, but it's going to be based in truth. Now, short term, this is what I start to say that you may need to take me to the Lord about. But my prayer is that Black Christians,
Hmm.
particularly Black Pentecostal Christians, that are in these white denominational systems, even of
Right.
like faith, where they have been silent about the evils of Donald Trump,
Hmm.
or worse yet, where many of the pastors and leaders in these groups, and I can think of some now. There's this is your line. I'm gonna be careful what I
Go
say.
ahead, Bishop. That's
Um,
why I'm asking you. I asked you a question.
but you know, there's a very large sister apostolic Pentecostal group
Right.
out of St. Louis, Missouri, who makes great literature, has a lot of truth. They say the whole truth of the whole gospel to the whole world, but they have been founded on racism.
Right. Right.
And I think that this is the time. My prayer is that until the leadership
Right.
repents, now they have made some general statements,
Hmm.
but again, you can't just make a general statement about we're against racism and then say, but we're supporting Donald Trump as a man of God.
Right.
And we're against these protesters, and we're against the concept of Black Lives Matter. And I want to say that clearly. I am in favor of the concept and the motto
Hmm.
of Black Lives Matter. I'm not embracing necessarily the political movement because I know that there's a lot of baggage that it has
Right.
of things that as a Christian I don't agree with. But if you want to, you show your heart when I say Black Lives Matter, and you say all lives matter.
Right.
On the surface, that just sounds wonderful. We all know all lives matter. But
we know that.
My house is on fire, and you say all houses matter. What you're really saying, let your house burn. All houses matter. That's foolishness. So
Right.
my prayer is that across the evangelical landscape, whether that's apostolic Pentecostal or whether that is whatever, that Black Christians will wake up and leave these slave plantation mentality leaders. If you can support Donald Trump, you don't love me. That's just how I feel.
So do you think? So I'm gonna ask this question. So do you think that at some point some of these leaders, God would touch their heart and bring them to repentance? Do you think it's going to be more of what you said, that the mass exodus and waking up and saying, wait a minute, we've lost a certain segment of our congregation? What do you think? Or is it going to take someone extending an olive branch? What's really going to take to do that waking and shaking to bring us together?
The reality is all of the above, with the exception maybe of the olive branch right now. We've been trying. I don't mean any harm, but
right.
And again, for a guy as light as I am, I probably sound pretty radical. But the reality is that Black people overall have been the most forgiving, loving, olive branch extending people on the planet for years and years. And I'm not preaching hatred. The truth is not hatred. The reality is, if you keep allowing your dog to come out and bite me, I need to take measures to protect myself. In a relationship, if you keep hurting me, I need to take measures to distance myself to keep from being hurt. So I think that there has to be a shaking and a coming to senses and a realization, hopefully a mass exodus. I'm calling them out. If I were on my live, I would say but I think that we have to speak out and be bold enough to say, you don't have a lease on righteousness. You don't have a lease on holiness. And if you have a history of consistent racist rhetoric and behaviors, then that's a sin just as much as adultery and fornication.
Absolutely. Until racism gets elevated to abortion and these other sins, it's almost like, oh, it's okay to be a racist. No, that's hatred. You have hatred in your heart, and you can't God enter the kingdom of hatred in your heart towards your fellow brothers and sisters. Let me ask you this, Bishop. You have been vocal on your platforms, on social media, at some of the other preachers and even politicians. I see you commenting on Donald Trump's post. Has he ever responded? But
no, he hasn't responded. I really don't get I get a lot of retweets and so forth, and I feel kind of bad sometimes. I have to. I think that as a pastor and as a bishop, and this is a great thing you brought up, I am trying to walk a line, not to become too much of a troll.
Okay.
I think it's unbecoming to. I confess. I think it's unbecoming to the ministry.
I'm just waiting for him to respond. That Bishop Moore in Atlanta just keeps nagging at me. But what is the role of the prophet in politics?
The reason I troll him is because I want my voice to be heard on my platform. I'm a gnat to him. I'm nothing, but I want my voice to be heard on my platform as responding to try to undress the lack of reason and the wickedness of his position. I have been guilty probably of trolling a couple of others, but I tried. I don't pick on anybody. I try not to pick on anybody smaller than what I am. If your following is a lot less than mine, I try not to pick on you. I try not to just go on people's pages and go after them. But if you're a large evangelical leader and you have a big black following, you're fair game. And I might shoot at you if you're doing stuff that is hypocritical.
So what is the role of the prophet in politics?
I think that I'm approaching trying to be, and let me say this, Bishop, if you'll allow me, I hope that everybody that's listening to this conversation, because I think this is great. Bishop Travis is an intellectual man. He's a well-read man, and he's asking great questions. And this is a great conversation. So if you're watching this and being blessed, would you tag 2 or 3 people? Would you share this with 2 or 3 of your friends? Maybe call somebody and say, you got to get in on this Mantle Monday with Bishop Truvell Travis, because this is a much needed conversation. Coming back, I think the church must have a prophetic voice. And as I read the scriptures, and I see the numbers are starting to go up some, as I read the scriptures, the leaders of the people of God have always spoken the truth of God to power, not just in their own nation even, but thank you for sharing, Brother Brown. But they've spoken the truth to other nations even.
Right.
I think that we in our modern era have a misconception of what prophetic is. We've limited the prophetic ministry to calling names and checkbook account numbers. We've limited the prophetic ministry to raising money. We have we've misdefined prophetic as really the word of knowledge. And I would submit to you that not everybody that has the word of knowledge is a prophet.
Right.
The word of knowledge is a gift. And some people have a very well defined, very well developed word of knowledge gift, but they're not really prophetic at all. I mean, I look at some of the popular prophets who, in their youth and in their arrogance and their foolishness, have predicted games. I'm predicting, I'm prophesying. There's only 2 teams playing. You could guess and have a chance. And I think it's just God that allows them to do that and miss, because he's exposing that. Right. I think that the role of the prophet is not to address pop culture, what star is going to live or die, unless there's something that's relevant to the nation about that. The role of the prophet is not to be predicting even the outcomes of presidents. And I've seen, again, one of the very popular prophets has predicted Donald Trump will not be president. That was in 2016. In 2017, he was inaugurated as the president. Some of these so-called prophetic evangelical leaders, calling for African angels and speaking in tongues and this chanting and so forth, that God will overturn this election. God's not doing that. That's not how God is operating, and certainly not to put corruption back in. God hates lies. So to finish the answer to your question, I'm just saying that the role of the prophetic office is to speak to systems and to governments. And if the church is silent, then we have lost our prophetic voice. We've lost our prophetic relevance.
Wow. So when you mentioned earlier about the beginning of the end and God's judgment, what do you think the church is guilty of that God is judging us for? Is that what you're talking about? The promoting of these prostituting?
Yeah, I mean, we have completely lost our. And when I say church now, I'm not just talking about the church that we know and love, the Apostolic Pentecostal Church that we're lumped into. But I'm talking about church dumb,
right?
And even the charismatic Pentecostal evangelical movement. We have made the church into an American institution with strictly American values. And that's a scary and dangerous thing, because we bought into this thing of feeling as though that somehow we are the new Israel. We're the new chosen of God, and we're entitled. And so the rest of the world can go to hell They can starve. They can. Uh,
Right.
am I allowed to say that, Bishop? I'm sorry.
Go
I mean
ahead.
it literally, though. But they can starve. They can kill each other off.
Right.
And we really don't care. We want to build a wall, and we hate the poor.
Mm-hmm.
We everything that the Old Testament scriptures talk about pitying the poor and caring for others, and being kind to your neighbors. The American church at large has done away with that. We have a form of godliness but deny the power. We have a church. If you look at the evangelical community that is lionizing and almost deifying Donald Trump, they have no problem overlooking his adultery and his paying porn stars and his 22,000 plus documented lies, because largely their lifestyles, many of them don't stand up to scrutiny.
Wow.
And so they preach a standard to the peasants.
Right.
They feel as though that they're entitled as leaders to live outside of. And I think all of those things are making God angry, have made God angry. So I think he's shaking. God is leveling the playing ground. You asked earlier, what's God doing? He's leveling the playing ground.
Mm-hmm.
You and I don't have large congregations
Mm-hmm.
physically, but now the playing ground is level. You're on a StreamYard platform, and potentially thousands will hear your message,
Right.
just as well as they'll hear the big guy's message. So he's leveling the playing ground.
I love that. Let me shift you a little bit, Bishop. I want to go back to your younger days. Not many people know you are. They see your books, but they don't know you are a Ivy League graduate. You are a
I don't talk
graduate
like
of
I don't
the
talk.
Harvard.
I don't talk like one. I try to keep that. I break verbs and everything.
But that process, in the Apostolic Pentecostal Church in particular, going to college. You're in Indianapolis at the time, and you're going to Boston to Ivy
Mm-hmm.
League. How did that happen? What were you thinking about majoring in? What were your career aspirations? How were your parents' perspective on education influential in that decision to go to Harvard?
Well, my father was the first one in his family to graduate from college, and he was one of the early ministers in the Pentecostalism of the world to go to college. I didn't say one of the only ones, but he was one of the earlier ones to actually go and complete college, and was ordained as at a very relatively young age. So he had a great perspective on education. He had a great admiration for education. He told me that and I didn't find this out until I was on my way to Harvard. He was driving me there. He said that he had named me for a preacher in Seattle. That's where I was born. A very famous preacher there, whose names were Matthew Mark, or Mark Matthew, and I don't know the last name, but Matthew Mark somebody. And he said he was a pastor and a lawyer. And so he figured by giving me the name Mark that he said, I figured he'll either be a preacher or a lawyer. Well, I didn't know any of that. All my life, I've felt this shadow of or this whisper that I would probably preach. But I was taught that you don't call yourself to the ministry, that God has to do it. And so as I was in high school, that's when I began to kind of blossom and come out of my shell. I was very shy. And about my sophomore year in high school, I decided that I wanted to do something that no one in the family had done, and I wanted to go away to college. My brothers had gone to local schools.
Okay.
And I said, I want to leave. I want to go somewhere else across the country to college. Now, I did not have Harvard in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I went and told my father, and he laughed. He just laughed and said, oh, boy, if the Lord wants you to go away to school, he'll let you get into Harvard or Yale or someplace like that. So I took that as a personal challenge.
And got in.
My motive was not, I want to go to the Ivy League. I want to go to the best school. My motive was, well, it looked like the only way Dad's going to let me go somewhere is if I get into a great school. So I applied to Harvard, Dartmouth, two Ivy League schools, and then Notre Dame in Indiana was my backup school. and I got in all three.
Oh my
And
goodness.
that was really miraculous in and of itself, because while I did have great grades, decent test scores, the competition to get into Harvard is amazing. Not 1 in 10 who apply get in.
Right.
They have hundreds of applications, or thousands, tens of thousands of applications for generally a class size of maybe 1,200.
So were there
And
many
so
Black Pentecostals there with you?
there were a handful of Black Pentecostals. Harvard is, of all the Ivy Leagues, Harvard has always been a leader in diversity. They've always sought diversity. And the backstory I found out after I was maybe 2 or 3 years in was that when they already rejected my application. But the application process includes an interview. And the Lord let my interview be with the president. I still remember his name, Dr. Philip Snodgrass, the president of the Indiana Harvard Club chapter, which now that's a big title because, as you know, alumni fund the school. And I didn't find this out until a year or two in, he went behind me and advocated for me and said, you all have to let this young man in. He's going to be. And so on his word, I got it. I'm so glad I didn't know that until I was in and doing well, because the first thing you think when you get in the first year or so, you feel like I'm a mistake. I don't belong here. And they're going to find out I'm a mistake. So I'm glad that I've been in long enough to get some good grades to find out I could do the work before I found that out, because that would have broken my confidence. But I saw the hand of God in that God apparently wanted me to go. My aspiration, Bishop, was to be a lawyer. I felt like I was called, but since I didn't know, I had the aspiration, well, I want to be a lawyer. And so my thing was, well, if I get into Harvard undergrad, then I should be a shoe-in to get into the grad school, law school. And so that was my strategy. And then, of course, in a very liberal arts school like that, there is no pre-law curriculum. You study liberal arts, whatever you want to study. So in my second year, you have to declare your major by your sophomore year. Early sophomore year, I'm praying and walking across the campus, Lord, what should I major in? What would you want me to major in? And I just suddenly knew religion. Still hadn't announced a call, but I just knew in my knower that God wanted me to study religion. So I studied religion, which involved taking classes at the Divinity School, which is the graduate school of religion, and then in the college. And I specialized, or I focused on Old Testament and New Testament studies, really. So I focused on the Bible.
That's good. So were you already a minister? Had you already been called to preach?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. So when did you get the call to preach, or when did you acknowledge the
I
call?
was in my junior year. And it's kind of funny how God works. I was invited. My father, one of his best friends, was the late Bishop Monroe Saunders, Sr. from Baltimore, Maryland. And Bishop Monroe Saunders came to us the summer of, I think it was 83, to speak. He said, because he knew I was at Harvard, I want you to come. You're a bootleg preacher. You're not a preacher, you're a bootleg preacher. You had that kind of British accent, and they said, I want you to come to Baltimore and speak to my young people. So that fall of 83, I went to Baltimore to speak for the young people. And I'd been reading through the Bible. I'd been having Bible studies on campus and people getting saved, but I wasn't trying to be a preacher. And I prayed and fasted for this, that weekend I was going. And I got up there on that Sunday morning as a guest speaker and preached. I mean, God preached through me. And it was amazing. 8 people got baptized. I think like 5 got the Holy Ghost. People were slain in the Spirit. And all this from a person who's not supposed to be a preacher. So it's like I'm pondering this in my mind. I finish out the semester and I go home for the holidays for Christmas. And I didn't have to be back at school till like the 20th of January or whatever. So I was at home for the annual winter consecration after Christmas. And I remember I was standing at the altar as the congregation was praying corporately. And I said, Lord, what do you want me to do with my life? I want to be in your will. I want to be in your will. And I heard the Lord say, preach. and
Okay.
preached my word. And I thought in my mind, I said, that can't be God, because it just sounds like my mind, and I've been thinking that all along. And it's like I heard the Lord say, no, it's been me all along, but you've just been too deaf to hear it. So
Okay.
over the next 2 days, I had these divine visitations where the Spirit of the Lord would come in my car or my room, and he would just like sit on me. And I would begin to cry, begin to weep. And so out of that, I went to Father before I went back to school, and I acknowledged the call. I said, I think I'm called to preach. He said, well, son, he said, God is a master of communication. If he wants you to preach, keep listening, he'll make it clear. Went back to school, and before I could even get back to this campus, um, I'm in a prayer circle. We're praying, and a young lady gets to prophesy to me and say, you're going to preach with power and boldness. Don't be afraid. It is me. I've called you. I'm like, well, how would she know? I get back to campus, and I get a call on my dorm room phone, the landline. I get a call in my dorm room from a pastor in Boston whose name I didn't know, who I'd never met, had no idea who he was. Number one, how would he even have my number? How would he find me? He finds me and says, I want you to come preach at my church. And so I called my pastor, my father, and said, can I? He said, yeah. I said, he said, that sounds like God is giving you your confirmation.
Yes.
So 2 or 3 really clear confirmations came that preaching was the thing.
Wow. So do you remember your trial sermon? Did you have an official trial sermon?
I don't know that I had a trial sermon, because that first little sermon I preached, well, it was in Baltimore. I wasn't claiming to be a preacher.
Okay.
And then I spoke at the church in Boston, and again, never been trained at all. I don't even remember what I talked about. I don't know if I talked about the name of Jesus or something.
Okay.
And then on my next trip home, my father put me up on Sunday night, and I guess you could call that a trial sermon. I think I preached "What's in a Name."
Wow.
And rose by another name would be just as sweet, but not Jesus. He's the rose of Sharon. He's the lily of the valley.
Preach Jesus.
I had about 5 minutes of material on that.
So let me ask you, Bishop, on a funny note, what would you say has been your most embarrassing moment as a preacher?
I don't know. I've had so many, both funny and not funny. But I've learned one thing. I don't know if my father told me this or my second pastor, Bishop Nelson in Baltimore. One of the things I learned either by precept or by word, or by example or by word, was they taught me you can't be easily embarrassed and be a preacher. So I've learned just laugh it off. I've gotten up and been teaching a lesson or started telling a story and get halfway through the story and can't remember what the story has to do with. What was my point? And so, that's happened plenty of times. So I just laugh. And laughing in front of the congregation disarms it. Like,
Right.
y'all, I don't know what this is about. And we just all have a good night. I've been corrected openly. One thing my pastor is good for is, if you do the crime, he's going to get you right where you did the crime at. So, coming in late, in front of 500 people, you look at his watch in the pulpit in front of everybody, I'm coming late. But those kind of things, I just didn't let them embarrass me. So
what would you say was and you probably haven't achieved it yet because God still got great things in store for you, but what would you say is probably one of the more memorable moments when you felt like, you know what, I'm walking on water. I done been to the mountain with Jesus. Can you describe one of those ministry moments?
Yeah. There are those times that you preach, and maybe it's a place where, the pressure was on, and, you're nervous and all, and God shows up in such a way that that God is with you, and everybody else knew that God was with you. To me, those are the highest moments. Sometimes been at a conference somewhere, or the pressure's on. You're preaching somewhere and the pressure's on, and God blesses your ministry and anoints your ministry in just a powerful, powerful way. those are the moments that you live for.
And your first pastorate was in Haverty Grace, Maryland?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. And then from there you moved to Atlanta. What was that transition like? What was that transition from Maryland to Atlanta? You had a great church. You had
it's really kind of, yeah. And the crazy thing is, I have been away from Maryland now for 20 years.
Okay.
And people still relate to my wife and myself and our family like we never left.
Wow.
So
20 years.
that whole pastor for 20 years, 19 years, that whole Maryland season for us was a season of just divine favor. The church in Maryland, in Haverty Grace, it was, number one, it was not on my agenda. And here's something that might bless somebody, Bishop. Everything I've told God in my ministry that I would never do, or I've told people I'd never do, those are things God had me do.
Okay.
When my father died, because I thought I would be his successor, and he died, I basically got kicked out of the church and went on the field in Maryland. I remember telling people that I just didn't see myself starting a church. Well, I'm in a church I started now. I said, God can send me anywhere but the East Coast. I just don't want to be on the East Coast.
Right.
He sent me to Baltimore. I said, I don't see myself ever pastoring in a city of less than 500,000. First pastor in Haverty Grace, population 10,000. That might even be everything. So I'm learning not to say what I won't do. The other lesson that I think someone could be blessed by, and if you guys haven't shared, why don't you share now? In fact, I'm going to hit the share button again. This is so good that I'm going to hit the share button again. But the other thing I've learned is that when God orders your steps, he has a sweet way of doing it, and he has a process. So I never thought after my dad died I'd have another pastor, because I couldn't see who could pastor me like he did. When I came to the place of saying, God, if you want me to have a pastor, I'll submit to that. That's when he brought Bishop Nelson in my life.
Wow.
Then when I went to Baltimore, I told the Lord, when I went there to serve him, I said, Lord, I know that I feel like I have a pastoral call, but I am willing to serve right here under this man until I die, the rest of my life. I'll serve right here. And it was really when I had that talk with God, and I said, Lord, I'm willing to serve here the rest of my life. It was a matter of months that God relocated me to Haverty Grace. It was accidental. I went to Haverty Grace because my pastor was the district elder, which, if you're not of Reformation that uses the term district elder, he was like a group lead pastor, X number of churches in a diocese. And he was the district elder over that church. The church had, and this is going to be controversial, the church was 42 years old, and had been started by a woman pastor, and was on its second woman pastor. Never had a male pastor.
Wow.
And it was Palm Sunday of 1991. I think it was Palm Sunday, 1991. I'm traveling, and I'm on my way back to Baltimore. Bishop Nelson, at that time, Bishop L. Nelson says, son, I need you to get back because I need you to go to Haverty Grace in the morning for me. Pastor Barnes has been in the hospital, and if you don't go, I've got to go. It's Palm Sunday. I said, yes, sir. So we drive all night to get back into Baltimore where I live, and I pack up my little family. At that time, it was just my wife, myself, and Mark Jr. He was, I think, 3 years old, not yet 4. So we all head up to Haverty Grace. And when I pull up to the church, it's a white cinder block building on steps. You have to go up steps to get in it. And, there was nothing attractive to me about the building, nothing attractive about the city. To be honest, now I love Haverty Grace now. It's a beautiful city, but I didn't see it that day. And it's on the water, but I didn't see the beauty. So I pull up and I hear all this noise and commotion, and they're in there having church. I mean, they're having church, but the music was not, I'm very musical. My wife is musical.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't sound good to me. And I'm like, my Lord, what is this? And before I could walk in, I heard the Holy Ghost say, this is it. I felt like something was happening. But the church wasn't no pastor. Like, why are you telling me this? I'm going here to help the pastor who's here. I go in, there's maybe 35 people there on Palm Sunday. And the pastor's sitting in the pulpit, sure enough, just got out of the hospital. I preach, and God blesses the message. Some people got reclaimed and so forth. So she says, I thought I was done. She said, well, I want you to come back tonight. So we came back that night, and again, it's like revival broke out. Mm-hmm. So the office is behind the pulpit. I could hear her having remarks, and I hear her saying, I like this young man. I like his wife. I like his style. And I think he's the man, he's the man. I'm like, the man, what man? I'm trying to get back to Baltimore. And she said, I don't want, Bishop Elder Nelson's right. I don't want my ministry to die with me. He's the man. I go back to Baltimore, Bishop, and I hope I'm not taking too long.
No, you're
fine. I go back to
Baltimore
that night. It's Sunday night, Palm Sunday. Monday, the church is in consecration prayer for Holy Week. So when I get to the church, Bishop meets me at the office door and says, son, did you hear about Pastor Barnes? I said, no, sir. He said, well, she had another stroke last night, and they don't expect her to make it. And if she makes it, she won't be able to preach. So I'm sorry to hear that. I'm not thinking anything else about it. I'm not thinking about it. So, I think the next Sunday they said, well, you'd have to go back and cover for me. Mm-hmm. Then they started sending me for Bible class, and they had 2 Bible classes in the middle of the week. And the bishop of the diocese was going on to his reward now. And my pastor said, well, how would you feel about taking the church? When I mentioned to my wife, I don't think she's wild, I can say this. My wife said, don't even talk to me about that. So I'm going up there preaching, and one night in the summer, June, I think it is, of 1991, and the church is growing, by the way. It's growing. It's filling up. Just almost miraculous. So in June, my pastor says on a Tuesday night Bible study night, he says, son, you don't need to go up tonight. I got it. I'm going to go up tonight. So I stay in. About an hour and a half later, I get a call from him saying, well, congratulations. You're the new interim pastor.
No warning, no nothing.
I didn't know that was coming. I did not know that was coming. So I was supposed to be on a 6-month trial. Okay. Well, within 3 months, they unanimously, I think all but with 2 abstaining votes, they unanimously voted me in as the pastor, and even voted in the church meeting my salary by percentage. They said he has access to X percent of the money. The congregation voted on it. They said, he can have up to, and it was a really great percent. The church paid for it. So they didn't. I didn't think they didn't see that working out as well as it did. But it's documented. It's said. And
the church, the regular succession planning, but it worked. In this case, it
worked. And so I became the pastor in September of 90. 90, I guess it was 92, September of 92. And the church began to grow and just prosper. And the thing that God used that church for, and this is a long, long answer to a short question you asked me. God used that church to heal me and to heal my family of wounds that had been inflicted in the Indianapolis experience with my dad's death. He used Bishop Nelson's church in Baltimore, that church. And he rebuilt my confidence. He rebuilt my faith. He rebuilt me. My 2 of my children were born there. George was born there. Sharon was born there. Wow. Mark grew there. And I'll tell you a funny story. He's not on, so I can tell this. Early in the very early days, my wife kind of went under protest. Now she came to love the church. She loved them. It didn't take long. But in the first few months, she was kind of under protest. And it was reflecting in my 3-year-old's attitude. Mm-hmm. So one Sunday or whatever day it was, we went back to Bethlehem Temple, which is a big church in Baltimore. And we walk in there. I think I was preaching that night. And my son, he's like 3 years old. Daddy, you see this? this is the kind of church you're supposed to have. He said, that little church up there in Harrogate, a little bit of fly can't even hardly get in it. And so I had to laugh because I said, I know where this is coming from.
Right.
But I mean, God used it. My wife fell in love with him so much within the first months, and then my children being born and growing there. They loved us to life. They loved us back to spiritual health. And they put up with, addict and kind of hard to get along with, charmingly dogmatic, but still, tough. And it was a healing place. So I was there for 8 years.
Okay.
And about in my 6th year there, the Lord began to kind of talk to me about the prayer of Jabez. He said, I want you to pray the prayer of Jabez. I was impressed to do this in a night prayer, that the Lord would enlarge my territory. And I didn't know where that was going to lead to. But then the Lord put Atlanta on my heart. My mother lived in Atlanta.
Okay.
And I knew that there were a lot of people that had some unrest in churches. Okay. And I just felt like that I was being led to start in Atlanta. So in 96, with no denominational backing of any kind, I went down to Atlanta on an exploratory trip that summer, spied out the land. And in November, I launched a church with maybe 7 people meeting in a Presbyterian sanctuary. And I would preach on Sunday morning in Maryland and fly out Sunday afternoon to Atlanta, preach Sunday evening to sometimes 15 people, rarely more than 20 people, and stay over, do Bible study on Tuesday, fly out on Wednesday or Thursday, come home and do it all over again. And so I did that for 4 years.
4 years?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So finally, after 4
where's your
years,
family living? Still in Maryland?
They were in Maryland. They were every Sunday when I would leave. A lot of times my wife would start crying, and then because she was crying, George, would start crying.
3
Sharon,
children.
who was just born, would see them crying. She'd start crying, and Mark would be teary-eyed, and so it pulled on my heart every week. But I felt like this is what Lord had me to do. And so after 4 years, 3 years, he began to say, I want you to relocate. I want you to leave your comfort zone. Because the church in Maryland was really good to us.
Right.
So when I left Maryland, I left 6 figures. I left a 6-figure income. I left a Mercedes-Benz, a late model Mercedes-Benz truck with the new pastor, a great salary. And I came here to uncertainty, total uncertainty. For the first year and a half that I was here, my family was in Michigan. As I was staying with my mom and then trying to find I think I got an apartment immediately, but it's a 1-bedroom apartment. And the whole point was, well, I'm going to dig this church out more and then get a home, bring my family down. It was 2 years almost before, they moved down to live. And I mean, they went from annual family vacations to no vacation for 14 years. They went from health insurance, dental coverage, and expense accounts, so forth, where we could be sick and all, to no medical coverage for like 14 years. And one year I lost 3 cars.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Lost 3 cars.
So what were you thinking through all this? I mean,
well, I was thinking, I was angry. I was angry with God.
Okay.
I went through a season of being really angry with God. I went through a season of being angry with people because in my mind, I felt like the same people who had, been cheering me on. Oh yeah, this is God. You need to just move down here. God's going to do it. People have a lot of faith for somebody else, but they don't have the faith for themselves to support like they should. And so, I was just angry for about 2 or 3 years. I went through a season of being just really angry and preaching through that, living through that, working through that. I've cut grass with a Harvard degree. I've cut grass to make a living. I've sold, sold vitamins, done multi-level, all of that. I used to, I would pull a trailer around, a truck, and my nephew and I were in business together cutting grass. And when my boys were out of school, I'd take them to help us. And, I'd pull that truck up for Bible class in a borrowed church building and go blow myself off with the blower to get all the grass out of my system, change clothes, and go in and teach Bible class looking, rough.
And this is the part of your
So,
story.
it was a real test.
People don't know. They see Mark Morton Sr.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
but they don't know the struggle and the sacrifice and, the wear and tear on your body, flying back, and the losses. They see the gains, but they don't know the story behind this. What would you say to a pastor that seemingly has lost everything being obedient to God?
Yeah. I saw my credit go from good credit to really, really bad credit. I mean, really bad credit. I see that. I see your question. But I mean, my credit at one point, and this wasn't because of just being irresponsible,
right?
It's because of being in ministry. It was so bad that, previously when I bought cars, I'd buy them in the church's name with me as the co-signer.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I went to do that, and my credit was so bad that they didn't want my name on there anywhere. Somebody else had to co-sign for the church, and they said, no, we don't want his name on here anywhere. But I also saw God restore that and restore my credit, restore my income. Now, it took some time.
Right.
But this blessed my preaching. This blessed my teaching. This blessed my ministry. It blessed my faith level because I saw God restore me without a large church. I was thinking the other day about how I live. I walked through our home and I said, Lord, this is a home that a lot of pastors of large churches don't have.
Right.
And it's God. Right. It's God. It's not so much the church. I look at my income and week after week, month after, I cannot account for all of my income. It's not based on salary.
Mm-hmm.
My income, and I didn't really realize this until I went to get the house and I had to start tallying up what my income looked like. And I said, I can't explain this, how God almost doubles my salary in just what he blesses me with.
Thank you, Jesus.
And how he takes care of me. And so
wow.
Thank you, Jesus. I've seen the faithfulness of God.
Thank you,
Lord, to where God will make it up to you. And that's what my pastor, Bishop Nelson, always would say. He said, son, God will balance the books. God will balance the books.
Somebody needs to hear that right there.
Yeah. I'm here to tell you, if you serve God, and God broke me. He's broken. I don't know that he's all the way done breaking me, but he's broken me to a point where he'll say, how do I say it? He would say, or I would say to him in prayer, well, Lord, if you never bless me, I'm still going to serve you.
Thank you, Jesus.
If I never have a big church, if I never have those things, I still am going to serve you. And I think that's where God wants to get us to, is that place of total submission. And Lord, if you want me to stay the rest, because the challenge, even where I am, is I know that there's anointing on my life. I've gone other places. I preached in another church for a period of 7 months and saw that church grow from, they seated 500 and they were maybe, the business administrator said they were less than half full. And within the 7 months I was there, within 3 of those months, it got to standing room only. And if you didn't get there early, you couldn't get a seat. So what was that saying to me? That was God saying, oh, I put it on you. You have it. But sometimes he doesn't let it manifest where you want it to manifest the most.
Right.
The question is, will you be faithful even in that situation? So if I can, Bishop, let me just answer. I think do you know Sister Sharina?
That's my
You know,
wife.
okay, I thought you meant,
That's the
uh,
missus.
how do you keep your family intact when it seems like your faith movers hit a dead end? I have to give three answers to that. One is God does it.
Mhm.
I have operated in crazy faith that I don't necessarily recommend to everybody. I do believe that if a man is the head of his home, he has to lead.
Mhm.
Leading is not always easy. You got to hear God. God did not speak to Sarah about the move. He spoke to Abraham,
Mhm.
and so Sarah had to follow Abraham even when she couldn't see him. That's a God thing, and that I give a lot of credit to my wife. Thankfully, my wife is a PK, and
Okay.
so she has some kind of understanding of this. This has been hard a lot of times, but the Lord has blessed us. I didn't take it. When I talk about our income going from six figures to low five figures, miraculously though, we never lived subpar as far as our home. God never had us move into a slum.
Right.
He always, even when I had to move for lack of money, I moved into a better place. So,
Wow.
God is so faithful that if it's a God thing, He will make a way somehow. So God did it. Then, secondly, my family is just a great family. Um, you know, when we went for years, and this may not amount to much to some, but we go from kids that have had cable and all of that.
Mhm.
Now there's no cable.
Goodness.
We learn how to enjoy each other's company. We learn how to have fun with each other. And so, really, I think the hardship made our family closer than what we might have been if we hadn't had the test. Because you go through a season when all you've got is each other.
Right. Right.
So we're gonna make it together, or we're gonna all fail separately. And so, my kids are soldiers now. I mean, they ain't no punks. Can I say
Right.
that?
Yes, sir.
They're
Yes,
not,
sir. But that's
they're not
amazing.
weakling,
They're not
and it has
resentful.
been the struggle that has
Mhm.
has. I don't think that you look at my son and all that he's doing. I honestly don't believe that he would be who he is
Right.
if it wasn't for the struggle.
Wow.
I think if I'd stayed in Baltimore, where
Right.
I was promoted through the ranks in the period W, I'd risen to
Right.
district elder. I was being promoted. My church was
Mhm.
popping. I think that he would have probably been could have been another charming but spoiled preacher's kid.
Right. Right.
And I think that because of the struggle and the sometimes feeling that people are laughing at you and
Mhm.
behind your back, and you're wondering, are we going to make it? I think that has done something to kick his faith to a level and to put an
Absolutely.
anointing on him. And same thing with Jordan, same thing with Sharon. So ultimately, our family is the better because of the struggle, I believe.
I've even laughed at that. I said, I don't think YLC come to Indianapolis or come to Baltimore has the same ring as come to Atlanta.
Yep, yep, yep. And who can say? I don't know that I'll always be in Atlanta.
Okay.
I think that I'll always have a foothold here because I'm the founder, the apostolic father of this church.
Right.
But I don't know that God will always have me here,
So let me ask
or
you a
even
couple
all of
quick
our
questions.
family.
I know our time is up and I don't want to take you too much from your holiday. You mentioned something there about your footprint in Atlanta. I've seen different denominations, I've seen different reformations, where it's more custom for a pastoral assignment to be for a season. And it seems like other reformations, the pastoral assignment is for life.
Yeah,
Is there a biblical explanation? Which one is more biblical? Is there one that's more biblical, or is one more correct than the other? Why is it that it seems that
I
you
don't
know God?
think I don't I don't think so. I think it has to do with what the primary calling on a
Mhm.
minister's life is. There are the fivefold calling: the apostle, really that should probably be the thumb, the apostle, the prophet, which is the pointing finger, the evangelist, which reaches further than any other finger, the pastor, and the teacher.
I like
And
that.
each one has a different personality. I
Okay.
think that you have more of an apostolic call, that you may be more inclined to go from place to place, or even one. See, there are some church leaders who are really an evangelist, even though
Okay.
he or she is the set person.
Hmm.
I think we have made a misnomer to think that the person who leads the church is the pastor.
Okay.
You can have a number of pastors in the church who shepherdize, but the leader may be really an apostle at heart. And so that mentality, that approach, that level of patience is very different. And so I think that whether someone stays more or goes, now it's also a paradigm thing too. You know, what paradigm are you locked into? But from a biblical standpoint, I think it depends on the calling that the person has.
Now, at this stage in your ministry, you've mentioned Bishop Nelson several times, and you've acknowledged him as your father in gospel now. Why is it important of a man of your stature, knowledge, wisdom, and experience to still need a father?
I believe with all my heart that every pastor, that every leader needs somebody that they look up to as a leader. Bishop Nelson has a pastor, even though his pastor is younger than he is, but he has a pastor who he tithes to. And so I earnestly believe that that's a principle, that two are better than one. I think that accountability, that humility, humbling oneself to be submitted to somebody. If I'm going to ask you to submit, if I'm going to ask others to submit, I should submit. If as a leader, as a pastor, as a senior leader, if I'm going to expect the people I lead to tithe, I should tithe. And see, that's where I know a lot of pastors are going to diverge with me because they say, well, I'm tithing to my church. Well, in my opinion, that's like taking money out of one pocket and putting in the other, because in most of our churches, we do have a lot of influence, if not control. We have a lot of influence over the finances. And so by me tithing out to the one who I feel watches for me, it's the same principle as our people tithing, that they then are learning this from me. That, hey, my son's on. That's Deacon George.
Hey, George. Thanks for joining us.
We were talking about you, George. I was talking about the family. I'm glad you missed that. But I think it's the principle of submission and of letting go of control. Let me say this, because Gabriel Jordan,
right, had a question.
How difficult was it to pivot my mind from the possibility of taking over from my father to planning a church from the ground up? It was difficult. I mean, God had to shake me. God had to beat it out of me. You come to a place later in life where you realize that the thing God denied, he was protecting.
Okay.
When God denied you something that you thought was your birthright, he may have been protecting you from an early grave. Wow. I'm so free. I'm so free in a church where, God has blessed me. It's not a large church yet. It's going to be by the grace of God. But the church we have, I feel that people love me. They respect me. Nobody's fighting me. Nobody's looking over my shoulder. I can pull my trustees together and say, I think we should do this or that. And they say, okay, well, if that's what you feel, they may give some pointers or some concerns, but it's not a fight. Whereas if I were somewhere else, I could be having to look over my shoulder all the time. Everything you say is second guessed. So I'm blessed.
So that was a question. Do you find it easier? Is it harder to take over a church or to start a church? Age-old question.
Well, I think it depends.
Okay.
I think if you're going to take over a church, there must be a very clear understanding of what your role is before you go. Bishop, you ought to write a book about negotiating to take over a church, because negotiating for that mantle, whatever, because a lot of pastors see the lights and the shine. Oh, this church has $1 million in the bank. Right. Yeah, but what you don't realize is they're not going to let you touch any of that. I know of a church that at the time the senior pastor died had $6 million in the bank, and they selected a pastor from a little town who never pastored, I don't think, more than 30 people, a church of 1,000 members or more, and they selected this guy from Nowhereville, Hula Hoop, to come and pastor, and there was a motive behind that. The deacons figured, well, we're going to take Goober here, and he's going to do what we tell him to do. So, and because the man didn't have enough experience to negotiate and to talk and ask those questions. So what is your view of my role? So Am I the CEO? Am I on the trustee board?
Right.
What do I have access to? Do I sign checks? If you don't talk about those things before going in.
I just had a consultation on everything you just mentioned with a pastor. Bishop, I think you froze. Did I freeze? Uh-oh. That's an indication, I guess, our time is winding up. If Bishop Moore is able to come back, while he's away, I'm gonna ask my wife to put on the screen his Cash App. Bishop Moore, if he says something to you, we don't raise an offering for ourselves, but if our guests have said something to you that really inspired you, uplifted you, gave you confirmation, gave you direction, we give you opportunity to sow directly into their ministry. And so Bishop Mark Moore's Cash App is there, M.A. Moore Senior, and you can sow directly into his ministry. I'm also going to pull up his websites so that you can run across the screen. You have bishopmarkmoore.com. You can also learn about his conference. You can get there from here, explore ycgt.com. You can also capture his ministry on YouTube, Mark Moore TV, Bishop Mark Moore TV, and you can catch some of his teaching and preaching in the comfort of your home. Thank God Bishop Moore is back.
Oh man, I don't know what happened. It may have been on my end, but I did want to finish that statement. Let me say, I hope that my websites are current because I've been absorbed with so much other stuff. I'm just sorry, but I hope that they're current. If not, you can always catch me on Facebook. I've got like 3 or 4 pages on Facebook. I've got Mark A. Moore. That's the one I do my political talking and ranting on and joking and cutting up. I have Bishop Mark Moore page, and you can get there as well as a page for the book Provisions for the Journey. So if you inbox me on the Mark A. Moore page, I check that most often, or the Bishop Mark Moore page in case the websites are not current. But Bishop, can I just finish the statement I was making about, because I think this is really important, that if you don't get an understanding going in to a church, you're pastoring, you're wanting to pastor, if you don't get an understanding going in, how is this going to be run? What is your government structure like? What are your bylaws? I would consider taking a church, but with a lot of prayer, because here's the other thing about taking a church. You don't know the people until you've been there for several years.
Right.
So everybody talking about, I love you and you're the best thing since
Absolutely.
Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
They may have told that to the last 3 that they killed. So, you have to be wary and you have to be very, very aware. But I wouldn't go into a church without checking the bylaws. I want to know, what is your posture if I decide that I want to rewrite these? What is that posture? I wouldn't go into a church without finding out, so what is the structure? Are the deacons in charge here? Or is the pastor in charge? Do I have to bring everything for a vote? Or am I the prophetic leader? Who sets my salary? How's that work? How often do we talk about that?
Absolutely. I love that.
You might have to go in, quite honestly. I doubt that well, I won't say I doubt, but a church have to be pretty good to take care of me as well as I'm taking care of now. So, if I'm going to consider even at a larger church, that's going to be a matter of discussion. So how often is salary upgraded? What expenses do you take care of? This pastor I was talking about, I almost said the city, and I'm so thankful I didn't. Man, you just unlocked my mouth. You unlocked my mouth. But and if you all haven't shared, hit the share button. I'm back. This pastor that I'm thinking about was in this large church that had $6 million in the bank. And a friend of mine preached for him, and the pastor was driving the church van back and forth because his car was broken down, and the deacons would not give him the money to get his car fixed. The church has $6 million.
You can't give him a transmission.
You won't fix the man's doggone car. That's the spirit. So I think that sometimes a novice will look at the accoutrements and, oh, they're going to have a salary of this, but what kind of hell they're going to put you through? You got to look at all those things. And another thing I would look at, now I'm going to stop, Bishop. I'm so sorry.
No,
but another thing I would look at is I would not go somewhere and take over unless I preached there, a couple of weeks, maybe. And I want to see what's the chemistry like with the people and the leaders. I want to see, is this a fertile church? If God is going to put me here, is this going to grow? How do they respond to ministry? If they're freezing you out and you're not even in,
absolutely,
you're going to freeze to death. So you need to have an understanding. How do you treat my family? What role? And the conversation with your spouse is to what role do you wish to play, and then what role do you see my spouse playing? I don't. Can I say this? My wife is not my co-pastor. She was. I'd probably be in trouble because she's very popular.
Right.
I mean, she's strong. She's powerful in her own right.
Right.
But the reality is, I'm the one that's going to have to give an account to God. And I know some people go in with this mentality of we co-pastors and all like that. That's not necessarily a God thing. That whole mentality. What if your wife is not called for that?
Right.
What if she wants to be your wife? I didn't sign up for. So is she going to be forced into a role? We're looking for a pastor and an organist. Does she sing?
Right.
But that's probably not a good situation, because even though she can sing, is she willing to want to sing every Sunday? I think that those are things you got to look at. And digging out a church, on the other hand, the question was, which is harder? Digging out a church can be hellacious, because every church doesn't grow by leaps and bounds like you think it will.
Right.
So your faith is going to be tested. Your tenacity is going to be tested. So either one is going to be some challenge. When you dig out a church, it's not going to pay you up front. I went through years and years and years of sometimes making $400 a week on a good week.
My goodness.
And that was as pretty much a full-time pastor with a family. So now when someone comes and says, well, you're making, X number of dollars a week. Wait a minute. Where were you?
Back salary.
This is back salary. Where were you doing all those years when I was supporting the church?
Right.
And out of my pocket. And now you want to come and join the church, and now you're going to tie my hands? Right. No, muzzle not the ox. I mean, I've proven my stewardship. Right. I give my giving record. I don't make the most money of anybody in my church, but my giving record is right up there with the top.
Absolutely, I understand.
I think not my tithe, just what I gave to my church last year was around $18,000.
And people don't see that.
No,
people don't see that. The preachers for the money.
No.
They rush.
I'm giving when other folk are not giving. I'm giving when other folk are not giving.
I would save money if I didn't have a church.
Yes, sir. Yes,
I would have nicer things if I didn't have. People don't see that far.
Yes, sir.
Wow, Bishop, I am so grateful.
I'm sorry for talking so long, man.
No, Bishop, I was worried about your time.
No, they're waiting for me. They're good. They're good
with this conversation, and I've learned so much from. My wife said people don't see this, but that's what I want through these conversations, for people to behind. We talk about success stories, but they don't know the story behind the success, and they see you on the flyers, and they see you as the dad of Mark Moore Jr., but they don't know what you've been through. They don't know your journey and your struggles and your triumphs. And I just want to paint this,
having to hide the car. I've had a car having to hide the car. I've had a car repossessed. Most embarrassing moment. Here it is. Car repossessed at church.
Oh my goodness! Not at the house.
During service. And I'm teaching on faith and prayer. Folk gonna, I guess he not praying. Had to get a ride home from church. Glad that my wife had missed that night. So, thankfully, the Lord covers us to where we survive that. My boys became men that night, in a sense, in front of everybody, having to help me get boxes out of my car with the cars on the truck. Glory to God. Glory to God.
What has kept them from being, with everything they've been through, what has kept them from being resentful towards the ministry?
Children learn what they live. And children love what their parents love. So yeah, they've had some moments. I would be lying if I didn't say that my kids have had some moments when they would have rather me be anything else but, a preacher, a pastor. But I think they've seen my passion. They've seen the love for God, their mother's faithfulness and love for God, and that has impacted them. And they've also seen the blessings of God because they've lived through everything with me. They've lived through it all. They've seen me do different business things. I did real estate stuff. I had no real estate license. I did investment. We bought $2 million homes. Lost them. I'm not talking about to live in. I'm talking about as investment.
Right.
Somehow the Lord gave me the wisdom how to put together an investment team and all. And we had a credit partner who put up his credit, and the whole thing. We were going to flip the houses and all. And this would be funny if it wasn't so painful. We closed on the house. This is before the real estate bubble burst. Back in 2007, we closed on the house, $1 million house. We got it for like $800K. There was at least 200,000 plus equity in the house. We were about to close on they called it a HELOC to get the money out, and we're going to flip the house or whatever. When we're calling now to get the credit partner to get the information, it's simple information to close on getting the money out. He's going to get paid. All of us going to get paid. He goes ghost. And we find out he's about to get on a plane to go to Iraq to play soldier. He's too old to be a soldier. He's going to go on a security force or something to make $100,000 a year when he would have been making $100,000 every 2 or 3 months, in 2 or 3 months as a credit partner. But the Lord let all of that fall, and it all fell on me.
Oh my goodness.
I lost $40,000 that I borrowed from a family member who trusted me. My name was Mud because I'm the preacher. We lose the houses and all. And these are things that I lived through that helped make me. And you know what? I paid back every dime. God blessed me to pay back every dime of that $40,000 I borrowed.
And I hear that, and it just makes me think about, wow. It's just so much that you're speaking to me, and I'm trying to facilitate a conversation, and you're ministering to me at the same time. But you're powerful. This testimony is powerful. I'm hoping it's blessing somebody. Hope you've learned.
I hope we can do this again sometime because I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying this because I
didn't
think
get to have the questions I had, so I might have to bring you back to do the other half of the question. But I guess my thing was, I mentioned about your children being resentful, but here you are, Harvard grad. You're a 4th generation apostolic preacher. You know you can preach. You know you're smart. You know your capabilities, and yet you see, I guess you say, a few members, car being towed, family struggling. How do you stay focused on the assignment and preserve?
You're trying to rub salt in my wounds?
No.
No, man, I'm messing with you. I didn't always stay focused, Bishop. I didn't always stay focused.
Okay.
I'm just telling you, sometimes the other things I was doing to try to make money was an escape.
Okay.
Traveling around the country doing things to make, and if I put my mind to making money, I can make money.
Okay.
Okay. I can make money, but the Lord keeps on slapping my hand saying, that's not what your ultimate purpose is. Gotcha. You're to make your money in your purpose. And all my blessing has come not from my other enterprises. Gotcha. The blessing on my life has come from my submission to God.
I love
And
that.
so, no, I haven't always stayed focused.
Okay.
Sometimes we're our own worst enemy. I wish I could tell you that I just stayed focused through it. I have stayed faithful through it all,
Okay.
but I've not always stayed focused. I preached through tears. I preached through not wanting to be at church. And some of my best preaching has come. My kids laugh about a sermon I preached, The Power of a Separated Man. If I could find that CD and put it online, that would be a top seller. But you could hear my pain in my preaching. They said at one point, they said, I was preaching, they're trying to take my stuff, trying to read it.
Wow. I love this. I love this. So Bishop, we went over our time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Enjoyed talking to you. Even though it's strange, I feel like I'm just having a one-on-one conversation with you, and that's how you've been to me, just open and honest and transparent and available.
Somebody needs to be.
Just when you the other week has said the Lord laid me on your heart and you reached out to me. I as pastors, a lot of times we're lonely, we're isolated. We feel like nobody cares, nobody is concerned. And I just appreciate your willingness to just look out for me and my family. And you took time out of your schedule to review our book, and you taught from it. And I'm just grateful for this divine connection. And
I
so
love the book. I love what you're doing, man. I sometimes wish I could go back to school and become a lawyer too.
Hey, I
Maybe
had
I
classmates of
will.
all ages, sir.
Sir?
I had classmates of all ages. So
You never know. You never know.
You never know. So in closing, is there anything that you would want to say to pastors or anyone who's watching? Just final words or final prayer, just whatever your closing thoughts are tonight.
Pastors, if you have a pastor, be to that pastor what you want your members to be to you. I try to be the most faithful tither that my pastor has because I want to reap that in our people. I would encourage you, if you don't have a pastor, pray and ask the Lord to give you someone not to be a buddy, not to hang out with all the time, not to, if she's a real person, woman of God, man of God, they don't always have a lot of time, but you want to know that they have your heart and that you have access to them. You want someone that's authentic and that is healed enough that they don't need you to boost their ego. I wouldn't want to be a trophy for somebody.
Right.
I'm not a trophy for Nelson. I'm a son.
Wow.
And so I urge you, we need to learn to be good spiritual parents and good spiritual children. I would say this finally: hang in there, be faithful, stay humble, be patient. Realize that maybe God's process and God's path for you is not at the same pace as somebody else's. Run your race, and God will make it up to you. He'll do it. Joshua was 80 years old when he came into his own. But those 40 years of serving under Moses were not wasted time.
Thank you, Jesus.
So I want someone to know you're not wasting your time. Stay faithful, stay focused. Keep your hand in God's hand and let God move you at his own pace. Hope that helps. Thank you for sharing. I commend you. I love the work you're doing. I love you. I love your family. I love your spirit. And I thank God for our association. If y'all haven't got his book, you need to get his book. Get his book. It's got that pretty mantle on it. He's got. I'm gonna mess with you now. I ain't never seen no pretty man. But mantle is really bloody. But
yes, sir.
it's a great book, though. It's a great book. And what he has, I mean, I think we're doing consultation now, even to help people with succession planning. I hope to be a beneficiary of that because I think that what you're doing is so important in the body of Christ. Thank you, sir. Thank you to your wife. Thank you to your family. You all are valuable in the kingdom.
Thank you so much. Let's give Bishop a hand. If your comments can say thank you, Bishop, how much you appreciate him. Was it thumbs up, hand claps, hands up? That's right. Thank you, Elder Easton from Maryland. Anybody else just want to thank him? My wife, I'm asked you put his Bishop Moore's Cash App back up so you can sow into him directly. if something he said has been a blessing to you, sometimes you just need that nugget, that key. You can feel the combination on the safe, and something was said that really just unlocked something that you've been wrestling and struggling with. And so if that happened tonight during this conversation, I want you to sow directly into Bishop Moore. Bishop Moore is also renovating his church. And so looking to do great things there. And so if you want to be a blessing to his church ministry, Faith Covenant Church, you can sow directly into his church ministry. During this pandemic, the Lord has blessed him to do a great work in Atlanta. And then your conference, I know this year a lot of things were on hold, but I encourage you to go to You Can Get There From Here Visionary Leadership Conference. What you hear tonight, he shared a lot of that during that conference, from his, pastoral struggles, if you will, success, balancing family and raising children. So I encourage you to attend his conference, and I also encourage you to buy his book, Provisions for the Journey. Follow him on Instagram, follow him on Twitter, follow his church, follow him personally. You want to be connected to a man like Bishop Mark A. Moore Sr.
Thank you, Bishop.
God bless you, Bishop. Thank
love you
so much.
I love you.
Love you, sir. God bless you. Wow. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for Mantle Mondays with Bishop Mark A. Moore Sr. I pray that you have been blessed by his experience, his testimony, his trials and his triumphs. And sometimes you see great leaders and you think, ministry is easy, but sometimes we don't know some of the things that happens behind stage, and some of the things that happens to break us and to build us. And you see the anointing on someone's life and you think it was just something that was handed to them, but there was a crushing, there was a pressing to produce that oil on that individual's life. And so the Lord has allowed us, we're going to continue Mantle Mondays into January. So I want to hear from you if this conversation or these conversations are blessing you, pastors, ministers, entrepreneurs, authors, leaders. If you want us to keep going, I'm doing this by faith, being led by the Lord. But the Lord has allowed us to go into January. Next week, we'll have Bishop Eugene McCrae, who's the founding pastor of Praise Temple, Way Across Church in Anchorage, Alaska. Hear his story from growing up in King Street, South Carolina, migrating to D.C., and then traveling from D.C. by van from D.C. to Anchorage, Alaska, to establish that church, and now has become a global missionary in India and Africa and different places. You want to hear his story. On January 11th, we have Bishop Jamal Jackson from Roanoke, Virginia. We have other great guests coming up in January. So set your clocks, subscribe to our Where Will the Mantle Fall page so you can receive those notifications when we do go live. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, Law Office of Travell Travis, where this is being streamed and archived. If you haven't bought our book, we always invite you to buy our book, Where Will the Mantle Fall? It's not just for leaders preparing for succession, but it also for those secondary leaders, aspiring leaders who may want to be the leader at some point. And so we encourage you to purchase that book as well as our other book, Don't Eat the Baby, The Characteristics of the Accountabilistic Church. I want to thank my wife for being the producer behind the scenes. She does such a great job and done so much to support me. And so we're praying God's blessings on you as we're closing out 2020, going into 2021. Remember, it's never too early to plan for success. May God bless you, heaven smile upon you. Good night in Jesus' name.